What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats and another Movement Skills short story this week for week 12 of the 2025 NFL season. In this week, like last week when we looked at Mark Andrews from the Baltimore Ravens on the trick play out of the tush push, we're going to find another player out of position, two players, in fact, out of position, executing in ways that they aren't typically accustomed to, but these novel ways create the platform for creative and deceptive movement behaviors to unfold on a collective level and then on an individual level. So we're going to look at Jameis Winston of the New York Giants, quarterback of the New York Giants, and really his wide receiver who's come on this reverse is well, throwing him the ball. So a player who typically isn't accustomed to throwing, a player who isn't typically accustomed to catching, and them actually scoring. Obviously, in this game, fourth quarter, Detroit Lions. The Lions are one of the best teams in the league, even though their record at this moment wouldn't exactly reflect it. But you're going to see players behaving in ways that they aren't typically accustomed to. But if we give them the opportunity and the canvas to go paint on their with their movement skill in this way, we see that players themselves that are playing in the National Football League are the world's best compensators, are the world's best adapters, and can often do so very skillfully here. So, as we can tell, third time through, let's look at this play in its entirety, and then let's think about what might have emerged in the moment and what we might be able to do as skill acquisition practitioners to be able to facilitate something similar. We're going to go slow motion now. Again, this reverse coming from left to right here, number 80, a player who is playing, I think, mostly because of injury. But you look at some of the nuances here, and we think about how the Giants might have practiced this. Of course, they probably practiced it against their scout team. But could we actually set donor activities? And we talked a little bit about that here in Enhancing Skill in American Football, as you can see on the screen. The book that myself, Tyler Yearby, and Rob Gray wrote earlier this year and then released in September of 2025. We talk about donor activities or donor tasks in games that we can utilize. Things like ships across the ocean, things like trash can ball, things like maybe monkey in the middle or keep away. All of these types of activities can really act as donor ones for players like 80. I'm glimpsing on his name right now, glitching on his name. But we find that players who aren't typically accustomed to throwing the ball might be able to do so, or players that might not be accustomed to interacting in exactly this way, with a rusher coming off the edge and looking to throw the ball downfield, might find more opportunities of behaving in that fashion. Again, I think the trash can ball or the keep away games that we could actually play with players to prepare their movement systems for problem solving could actually work and serve as an opening opportunity of perceptions, cognitions, and actions for players who aren't accustomed to throwing and players who aren't accustomed to catching, like Winston and his wide receiver would be here. We can think about that first and foremost, and we can use that, at least from my perspective, when we do in our learning environment, by using these donor activities as a way to prepare the entirety of the human movement system for problem solving. Now, once Winston gets the ball in hand, we see him go in this problem solver state and frame of mind in this 1v1 interaction with this linebacker who has now found himself downfield with him. 1v1, behavior affords behavior, problem and solution dynamics flowing into one another, and what we might be able to do is slices and snippets of the game at relatively low complexity. I'm going to go off screen in a moment to show you this and see what Winston was able to do here to get Barnes leaving him empty handed before Winston finds his way to the end zone. First, obviously, Winston has to catch the ball. Well, first, 80, gosh darn it, I'm blanking on his name at the moment. I know he's typically a special teams player and a standout special teamer at that. But not accustomed to throwing the ball, does so here. Winston, not accustomed to catching the ball, does so here. Now, how often can we get players all the way from middle school to high school to college to professional levels more opportunities 1v1 to do exactly this? And we do this quite a bit. Even if a player tells me, as Winston would if he were in our learning environment, he's not, but if he were, like I don't find myself in this situation very often, right? We will still require quarterbacks in our learning environment to be immersed in this type of 1v1 interaction. Now, we typically would do it between the hashes, as I'll show you in a moment, but we could do it between the numbers and the hashes here and actually make Winston catch the ball. You're going to see him kind of fumbling the ball in many of those cases, not necessarily like it's like a fish out of water or telling a fish to go climb a tree, right? Like he's not accustomed to doing this. But in this 1v1 interaction, where he might be able to work in different ways in relation to how this player is moving and interacting, right? And I'm just drawing lines on there rather randomly because that's exactly what could unfold in our live zigzag or in our one-on-one make a miss activities that we do on the daily, one variation or variety or another. And then we see Winston just kind of really getting connected to the information that's there, but it isn't so much about him being perceptually attuned or sensitive. It's about him opening up his adaptive degrees of freedom from an action standpoint to just act accordingly and compensate in any way, shape, or form to find himself into the end zone. Let's watch it again at this angle before we go off screen. And we're going to go to the other vantage point here after we see Winston and his crew, his team, celebrate and celebrate accordingly out of this trick play. Again, we saw Mark Andrews doing the same last week with their winner in with the Baltimore Ravens. We see the same thing here from this reverse to a pass. Winston finds his way sneaking out, and Barnes goes with them. Winston throws his hand up in the air, Randy Moss style, before then putting Barnes, number 55, on his poster, just acting adaptively, compensating highly functionally. Okay. Let's share off screen here now some different things that we might be able to do first and foremost. Two different activities that come to mind for me, again, from enhancing skill in American football here. This first, cat and mouse or make a miss in a short space in a phone booth that we can utilize. We can open this up as well if we wanted to. Okay. I give all of our offensive players and defensive players alike an opportunity on both sides of this cat and mouse type of coin, right? And then we will really frequently open this up to different spaces. You can see this is between the hashes. We will sometimes do this, of course, or that's inside of the hashes. We will sometimes do this between the hashes, depending on if we're working on an NFL hash or a high school or college hash. We will sometimes, if I can erase that and bring us our workspace size, we might do that. Right here in this workspace size, we do this quite often, as any of the players that partner with me will tell you, typically between the hashes and the numbers on the high school field. We could do that same thing, obviously, on an NFL field. Typically, we're working with my NFL guys on a high school field somewhere in the metro area. But we will do that hashes to numbers, usually 10 yards long. We might take that up to 15. We might keep it just at 5. So like there's all different workspaces that we could do this with that would then serve to channel the perceptions, intentions, and actions of both parties, cat and mouse, offensive player and defensive player, trying to corral him, tag him off. We could, even though this is drawn on a high school field, obviously, as you can tell based on the numbers, like what we saw on this one, go in something like this workspace, or like if I'm just drawing this line, and then putting our X's and O's in there, just bear with me if you would, as we saw Barnes and Winston. Winston catching the ball, being able to go left or right, and I'm just trying to kind of drawing this for you, like he could come here, he could come here, like he could go there, and obviously Barnes would follow him accordingly. You see that it looks a lot like this one, right? Pretty similar. We're just moving that workspace size in area to be in a different place because it creates a difference in boundaries. It will create a difference in when we go from 1v1 to 1v2 or 2v2 as to where it might happen on the field. But we want to give all of our offensive players and defensive players alike goes and a lot of goes, a lot of exposure. I think we can and should do this more in indie periods as well as crossover periods across positions. Okay. 1v1, do it a lot. We do it a lot early in our day on the field, but we do something 1v1 every single day. Okay. Then that could also then take shape in an alive zigzag, which I've shown here before. We could move this to different places on the field, just as we just talked about. It wouldn't have to be here. Now, this one is wider than the hashes, but we could do this outside if we wanted to. We do this a lot in this space also. Hashes to numbers really frequently and 15 yards long, or hashes to sideline in 15 yards long, and just move this interaction that we see taking place right here, this alive zigzag, into one of these spaces, right? You guys kind of get the idea? And we put both of that happening here or here, as I'm getting really feisty with my telestrator. Hopefully some of that makes some sense. We can do this alive zigzag. We do it really frequently, offensive and defensive player. It emerges in a different way every single time. It will emerge differently depending on where you have this player right here, this defender start, and how you have him starting. If he's head up with chest up to him, if he's got his back turned, he could already be ready to try to bail here or here, depending on if this guy goes there or there. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. And this offensive player is trying to just get this defensive player turned around in a very similar way to we saw happen. If I were to share once again, right here, Jameis Winston doing his thing. Let's bring it back, right, to where he gets the ball in his hands right after the celebration. You guys see it, gets the ball in hands. He's basically doing that exact alive slalom, that alive zigzag in space, 1v1. And he adapts functionally, as you guys will see. It unfolds in a very similar manner. He's trying to get him turned around. He's trying to work with space. He's trying to solve the problem that's there with the what is, and he's trying to do so in an awfully adaptive fashion. So as you guys can see, those trick plays begin to take advantage of a player's abundance and adaptability, and it attempts to channel both of them. But I believe that we can create slices and snippets of the game and expose all of our players, offensive and defensively, to be put in some of these positions to do it and do it more functionally. So we can trust that when we call a play like that, it might be able to catch the defense off guard or catch other players off guard. And we could then rely upon that which what is happening for our players in their movement systems because they're that accustomed to solving those types of problems. So hopefully you guys can see how a play like this, even though it looks like a novel one, it looks like a creative and new movement problem for each one of those respective players, might not be so new after all, even if it only happens one time, even in this NFL season or across a player's career. So for Movement Miyagi, I'm Sean Mishka, and the Football Beyond the Stats at our Movement Play of the Week. I will talk to you all next time.